Howdy! My name is Drewsif, and today we're going to go over the mixing of Greylotus's Shinkansen. A couple of things off the top. I do top-down mixing. Our drums were performed by our drummer Matt with MIDI. For the sake of time, because we're touring a lot, we made the decision to use MIDI drums and sample replacement. I'm not going to do this quite like the other How I Mixed It videos where you're mixing from scratch. What I'm going to be doing is going through our tracks and turning on plugins and then explaining what I'm doing with those plugins and those mixing decisions. Let's talk about some routing. I've got all of our instruments running to a 2-bus, and that 2-bus runs to our master bus. And then beside that 2-bus, we also have a vocals all bus, which is just everything vocal related. And then we also have an effects bus, which also runs straight to the master. And we'll get into why I did that a little bit later. A lot of the times when I'm doing all buses, I'll actually be doing an all bus before my all bus. You kind of have a bunch of master faders that then go into a master fader that then goes into a master fader. If I end up going, oh wow, all of my drums are too loud, I can just kind of pull it down just a little bit. Or there's a spot in the song where we do a hard cut with our drums. Let's do this. Since we're top-down mixing, I'm going to throw on our 2-bus and our master plugins. First thing I'm doing is I'm running Brainworks SSL channel emulation. These are cool because they actually legitimately, like, they sample and model every single channel on an SSL board. So all the EQs change just a little bit between all the different tracks and stuff. I'm not going crazy and selecting my favorite tracks worth of EQ. I just kind of hit random on the channel that I pull up. Total harmonic distortion, we're running at about -35, which is pretty hard. Gives us a little extra excitement. I'm pulling down my master fader to about -3 to make up for the boosting. And speaking of which, we have a +6-ish dB high shelf at about 9K roughly. And then we have a +3-4-ish dB low shelf at about 140. These other two plugins will come in later. And let's take a look at our master bus. So the first thing I do is kind of the nollie maneuver. So I'm running a FabFilter Pro C attack of about 3 milliseconds and then a release of right around 50, pulling the sidechain EQ up. So basically it's just using the snare. I'd play it right now, but nothing's mixed, so it's not going to do what it's meant to do. But basically, whenever the snare hits, it ducks the whole mix just a little bit, just to poke that snare out a little extra. After that, an SSL/VCA style compressor from Softtube. Love Softtube's compressors. They are phenomenal. Pretty fast attack and a pretty fast release. And we're doing dual mono. I love dual mono. I've overused the crap out of dual mono. We have our sidechain filter at about 120 hertz so that we can kind of ignore the kick if it starts pumping the mix. We're parallel compressing this, so this is about 30% wet. And this just gives us a little extra excitement. The next maneuver, Pro Q, just the sides. We're low passing everything so that we get that nice mono low end. Arguably, this isn't a thing that people do anymore, but I don't know, I still like doing it. Bass doesn't help you coming from the sides, supposedly. After that, we are doing a healthy amount of tape saturation, once again with Softtube's tape. A little bit of crosstalk to kind of blend our channels a little bit, giving us a little bit of extra glue business. This really is just going to do a very, very soft clip. I believe the C setting boosts your treble just a little bit. We start getting into our secret sauce. It's occurring to me that I should probably have actually done this at the end so I can show you what's going on, but I guess we can jump back to it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different bands, multi-band compressing, taming all of our different EQ zones across the entire mix. We're just compressing at like 2-to-1 at most, except for the high frequencies, which is compressing at a 4-to-1, which is a little crazy, but it's treated me well for the last I don't know, 6 years, 10 years, something like that. This is kind of how I've been doing it. So slow attack, pretty quick release on the low stuff. That's basically just so that we catch everything coming in and it keeps it a consistent volume. So like this first band is our sub, and then we have our bass, and this is doing essentially the same thing. Even quicker release, even slower attack, just to kind of tame stuff. This is our mid band, pretty slow attack, pretty quick release. Same idea, just catching everything, gluing everything together. We're only doing a total of -3 dB, which is still pretty big moves for mastering, but you know, I like to live dangerously. On our high mid band, it is a similar situation. We've got a slow attack and a quick release, but the big change on this one, we've dropped our stereo link to about 30%. Similarly, for our high band, we're down to almost no link, and that is a much faster attack and a slower release, and that's where we're at 4-1. Interesting. I thought I was running 2 Saturns, but I guess I didn't do it on this mix. Once again, 4 bands going on here, doing very, very hard saturation and then pulling the mix to almost nothing. Similar stuff going on here. Hard saturation, pulling the mix back. Hard saturation, pulling the mix back. And then hard saturation and pulling the mix back. So we're doing that on the whole thing, and basically, it's like clipping the shit out of your mix, but you're pulling everything back, so you still get your transients. You just also get the nasty stuff. OTT, which is like a mega compressor. This is like the Doom compressor, basically. And we're only doing upward compression, and we're barely mixing this guy in at 15% depth, and then a little bit of an out drop to make up for the extra volume. Lastly, our lovely Flatline 2 from Submission Audio, and this is just a -1 dB ceiling. Our threshold is set so that we're getting roughly 4-ish dB of gain reduction. I like shooting for a short-term -9 LUFS. Who cares, man? Do you. Whatever works, works. Let's do some drum stuff. Okay, so this is a number of different drum samplers and samples that I have kind of melded together. So actually we can take a look at that. So our main kind of bass here is RS Drums Fairview from our pals Anoop Sastry and Alex Rudinger. This is a lovely, lovely drum sample kit. The focus here has been to recreate Matt, my drummer, his actual kit. So we're doing our best to use the exact tom sizes and literal cymbals, because we're lucky enough these days that we can pretty much have any minor cymbal you could ever want. For Fairview, we're not using the toms or the snare, but we are using the kick. And then we are using the crash, the hats, one of the splashes, the X hats, another crash, one of the chinas, another china, because, you know, death metal. And then we move over to EGD Invasion, where we use one of the chinas, bell, teeny tiny stack, one crash, and the ride cymbal. Beyond that, the toms, 8, 10, 12, 16. Also, a little bit of reinforcement from GGD P4 snare. So that's kind of our main snare, I believe. The Pearl Reference brass. Or actually, no, sorry. That's our reinforcement snare. We have the metal machinery done at titanium. Great big ringy boy. Invasion, we're also using the kick trigger sample and the snare trigger sample all together. A whole lot of tracks. So there you go. We're using 1, 2, 3, 4 different drum samplers. And then on top of that, back in our main session, we also have some extra samples. Obviously, that sounds different because we have our 2-bus and our mastering turned on. First thing on our kick. Already sounds pretty nice. Our kick track from RS Drums. We're doing some crazy EQing business. Pumping in a little bit of the 100 hertz, clearing out a whole bunch of the mid-range junk, spiking up a little bit of the high mids, clearing up some click, and then I guess that's maybe like a hiss or some sort of thing around there, and then pulling up some top end. So here's without EQ, and then with. So focusing our kicks low end a little bit on the higher end of the spectrum as opposed to the sort of sub end. After that, kick trigger. Similar thing, boosting up the sub this time, pulling out a bunch of junk. I'm sorry in advance, my EQ curves are gonna look crazy. Sorry for the purists, but this is what we're doing. Boosting up sub, clearing out some mids, clearing out some ringy stuff, cleaning up some of the kind of slap, and then boosting up our treble again. On top of that, saturating our low end just a little bit and slamming the saturation on the high end. So without, and then with. So it looks like we're basically just using this for extra sub. And if we put our 2 together, and then kick bus, probably a similar thing to what we were doing on the kick trigger channel. Absolutely nothing on our subs. This is a thing I like to do. And then on our high end, like right around 500 hertz is our crossover, and we're just slamming the saturation and then just a little past halfway mix. So without it, and then with. Gives it a little extra to it. It's the technical term. Then we're doing a little extra EQ, pulling out apparently where I boosted earlier, because of course, clearing out some middle ring crap, hitting our high mids a little bit again, and then clearing out some clickiness, I think. Yeah, that is an angry kick drum. And that's our kick drum. You might see the -3-ish on our drum bus. I just shoot for about -9 dB on my drum bus. That's just kind of how I like to mix. That gives me, I feel like, a decent amount of headroom there. Okay, so let's do some snare action here. Here's our thousands of snares. Maybe we get a little spot with some. As you can see, we've got this split into the superior snare, P4 snare, and then the snare trigger, which is basically doing nothing. Superior snare top. Just throwing on an EQ that cuts out a ton of ring stuff. Cutting out a bunch of ring around the mids. Clearing out some of the crack, cleaning up some of the pop area as well. Then an SSL E-channel emulation, a little bit of a boost on the high shelf, some gentle compression, slammed the harmonic distortion knob all the way up, give us a little extra saturation business. So our release is all the way down on our SSL compressor, and our ratio is right around 3. And yeah, we're getting not a whole lot of gain reduction there, like maybe 3 dB of gain reduction at its hardest. So just a little bit to kind of glue them up. Go on to our second snare top. Holy crap. We are going absolutely ham sandwich with the EQs here. Clearing out ring and some honk. Yeah, you can hear that really honking and ringing. There's another cute little trick up here. Make a channel dynamic. Hi, Editing Drew here. I explained this terribly So the idea is that you can set a threshold where it will pop your volume up, but otherwise it stays lower. So as opposed to a standard EQ where you're just always bringing that shelf up plus 5 dB or whatever it is, it stays at a constant lower volume until it hears the snare playing and then jumps up. So it's a great way to take care of hiss from recordings and that kind of thing. Same thing here. We have an SSL E channel going on, not doing any EQing, slamming the harmonic distortion. Compression's about 2-to-1 with the quickest release. I bet this isn't even doing anything. Yeah, there you go. So 3 to 6 dB on the very hardest hits. Just kind of cleaning it up, doing a little gluing. Let's jump on to our superior snare bottom. Same thing, we're clearing out honk, clearing out ringing. I find 4 to 5K area on snare bottoms are absolutely abysmal. Pretty much all the time. Maybe I'm weird, I don't know, but previous. And then with our EQ. So we're really just dialing up that sizzle like big time. But also still leaving a little bit of room around the 180 hertz for the thud to still be coming through. After that, you guessed it, the SSL emulation with the harmonic distortion dimed, even more of a high shelf boost around 8K, compressing at 2-to-1 again with the fastest release, and probably 3 to 6 dB of gain reduction. Not a whole lot of difference there, but just a, little something. FabFilter Saturn with just a little bit of drive on our low band, just a little bit of drive on our high band. One of the nice features of FabFilter Saturn is this dynamics knob right here, and it's basically just an idiot mode transient designer. Here without it, really washy. But if we throw Saturn on and we turn this dynamics knob down just a little bit, it gives us more of a transient and less of a sustain. So before and then after. So that is our superior snare, and all together let's move on to our GGDP4 snare. The little FabFilter Pro Q3, clearing out that honk area yet again, and then clearing out that 4 to 5K area. Looks like a little dip at 11K, probably like a little hiss business going on. So here's our before and after. This zone on snares drives me bonkers. After that, yes, indeed. We have got an SSL E-channel emulation just to do the compression, it looks like. Although, yep, our harmonic distortion is dimed. I think I meant to turn the V gain down on that, but I didn't because of course. So 2-to-1 compression, quickest release, you know the drill by now. And that's given us 3 to 6 dB of gain reduction. So before and after. Just a little snappier. Snare bottom, P4. What are we doing? Same stuff. Clearing out our ringins and our honkins, getting rid of that psh, 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 psh area, and then slamming our super high end. So before and after. SSL emulation. Total harmonic distortion all the way up. No EQ, 2-to-1. I bet I just copied over this from the other track. Probably 3 to 6 dB gain reduction. Just kidding, no gain reduction. All right, so just for the harmonic distortion, which probably isn't even doing anything because I bet the input isn't high enough to do anything with that. So same thing, Saturn II, the same as the first snare bottom, make it less washy and more snappy. Before and after. Those two snares put together, we get this. And if we put all of our snares so far together, snare trigger. I'm pretty sure this track is like inaudible, but I had it, so I figured I'd use it. Not great. Cleaning out our honks as usual. Cleaning out that area really hard. I'm not sure what's going on with that. And then cleaning out our crap. You know, the same thing we've been doing this whole time. So here's before. And here's after. Basically, we're just using it for that low-end thud. And then after that, SSL emulation, woohoo, baby! Doing the same crap. 2-to-1 ratio, probably 3 to 6 dB gain reduction, total harmonic distortion knob all the way up. Just giving us that nice thud. So all together, before the snare trigger track, and then with the snare trigger track. Not a big difference. Wah. Whatever. All right. All of that goes into our snare bus track. Clearing out more ring, pulling back up our 4K, because of course you pull all of it out and then push it back up. And then we're doing FabFilter Pro Q3's dynamics trick again. So before, after. After that, we're running into Softube's FET Compressor Mark II. I live for this plugin. Every day of my life, I live and I wake up and I get excited to use this plugin. A 2-to-1 ratio, moderate attack, fastest possible release, using our drive knob a little bit to do some saturation / soft clipping. Our side chain is set at 117, just to kind of ignore the very lowest bit. I probably didn't need to do that, but whatever. Our dry wet is at 75%. So we're still getting some of the unaffected transient. Here's our before and after. Making him a little angrier. After that, we've got Saturn II, the very littlest bit of drive on our low band, and I'm betting I did the dynamics thing. Yep, just a little bit of drive on our high band, and we're pulling some dynamics out. The transient shaper thing one more time. So before and after. And that's our snare. Okay, so for now, I'm gonna mute our room tracks. Cool, so let's check out our toms. Cool. So this is going to be very similar across the board. Our first move, FabFilter Pro Q3, pulling out a ton of woofy mid, clearing out a nasty ring frequency, dropping everything below 125 hertz, then boosting around 2K. And that's it on that guy. Here's our rack tom. And then after EQ. The 2K boost thing I really like because you get that kind of mid-range smack slap kind of business. We jump over, yep, it's an SSL emulation, full harmonic distortion. The difference on this one, we are actually using our gate and our expander. Doing just some gentle gating, expanding kind of business. Basically no different, so that's good. That didn't need to happen. But our compression is right about 3-to-1. Our release is as fast as it gets. Our threshold, you don't care about the threshold. We're hitting about 3 to 6 dB of gain reduction. Once again, the little glue action. So this is going to be just about the same for all of the toms, with the difference being just clearing out specific ringing frequencies, and then high pass will be changing its crossover frequency so that we can let the resonance frequency of the tom come through. So here's our rack tom 2. With our EQ, pulling out mids, cleaning up the low end, giving us more of that smack, cleaning out some of the pop area. We get this before, after. Woohoo! Guess what? Our harmonic distortion's turned all the way up. We are doing the same expanding business. I don't know why, but yep. 3-to-1-ish compression, release as fast as possible, shooting for 3 to 6 dB of gain reduction. You're done. Same thing on rack tom number 3. Let's see it happen. Yep. Now high passing to 70 hertz so that we can get that nice low slam. Cleaning up a bunch of the mid crap, including some ringing business. Pulling up the smack frequency and then cleaning out that. This might be almost the exact same EQ. Before and after. SSL time, baby. We're doing the same stuff with the expander. We're doing the same stuff with the compressor, shooting for 6 dB. Our total harmonic distortion knob is turned all the way up. We're not doing any gain reduction. Joke's on me. Don't worry about it. Don't look at it. Let's move on. Floor tom time. Same crap. Pulling out the mids. Letting the low come through. Now our high pass is at 50 hertz, so we can let that big sub come through. Floor tom before EQ. And here's after. And SSL, yes. Distortions turn all the way up. We're doing the expander thing. We're shooting for 3 to 6 dB gain reduction. Yes. So all of our toms. Guess what? It's all going into a tom bus, baby. It looks like I'm undoing everything that I just did. So we're pulling down our resonance slammy frequencies and then just doing a general low shelf and then pulling up our super high clickiness. So before and after. Sometimes in mixing, you make a decision and then you realize your decision was not a good one. So you go back and you undo it, but you undo it by doing a different thing instead of just undoing it. That's how it goes. That's the world we live in. All right, SSL emulation. You guessed it, buddy. Total harmonic distortion is almost all the way up. It's not quite all the way up. We're not doing any expanding or compressing. So it looks like, yes, 9K high shelf, and that's all that we're doing. This plugin is just giving us a little bit of saturation and slamming our high shelf again. So here's before and after. Now we're doing an SSL bus style compressor, the VCA compressor from Softtube, shooting for a very small amount of gain reduction, I do believe. Slow attack and a quick release. We're doing our dual mono, and our sidechain filter is set to 1K. So the whole point is this is only compressing the top end slap from the toms as opposed to the big rumbles. Also doing just a little bit of output drive, so we're doing just a little bit of clippy dippy. 4-to-1 ratio. Threshold is crazy high. Mix knob is pretty low. So I think actually I went for a mega compressed sound and then mixed it in slightly. So here's before. And then after. If you turn the dry all the way up, yeah, that's nice. All right, up next, we got an LA2A style compressor. This is going to be doing pretty much nothing, I think. Yep, just a little bit of gain reduction, like not even 1 dB, just to kind of glue everybody back together. Lastly, we've got Fab Filter Saturn. Why did I do that? Okay, all right. Oh my God. So all of that extra ring that I just brought back by the parallel compression, we're pulling back out with FabFilter Saturn by doing the dynamics knob trick, and we're doing a little bit of extra saturation. It looks like this is mixed also. I'm doing a lot of transient designing, but then mixing all of it back in with its original transient. Here's before and after. Taking everything and putting it together to have just the right amount of sustain, but just kind of doing it in a bit of a strange way. We also have a tom verb channel here, which we are not using because there's no tom verb in this song. So don't look at it, don't think about it. Let's move on to our cymbal bus. We have an unbelievable amount of cymbal mics throughout all of the different samplers that we use. Our standard hi-hats, we've got a ride track, and then I made a group for our spot mics, one coming from GGD and one RS drums, I believe. We have an overhead group, and that's where all of this gets a little tricky. Let's check out our hi-hat. Yeesh. All right. I've noticed the RS drums hi-hats go absolutely ham sandwich in the treble end of things, whereas I kind of want to use my hi-hat mic to bring up our middle area. Here is our before. There you go. And here's after EQ. Pulling out a lot of that high end so that we can get our 500 to 1K area back up. Guess what? Yeah, total harmonic distortion turned all the way up on an SSL EQ. 3-to-1 compression with the fastest release, shooting for 3 to 6 decibels of gain reduction. The very smallest pull down of a high shelf. So yeah, here's before and after. Let's take a look at our ride. We are cleaning up some of the rings, bringing up our 800 hertz area, which is kind of our call, cleaning up more ringing, and then pulling up some highs. So before and after. Not a huge difference, but a little something. After that, FET Compressor Mark II once again. We're doing a good bit of drive, compressing the crap out of this at 12 to 1. Here's without and with. And there you go. On our spot groups, looks like I'm not even doing any EQing. So there you go. Just pulling the levels down a little bit. So let's move on to overheads. So as you can see, we have 3 different overheads happening here. Our overhead from Get Good Drums, we have our overhead from RS drums, and we have our superior overhead. So the first thing I did was pull our superior overhead down because that snare drum is much louder than everything else. On our Get Good overheads, I did nothing, but I had an EQ track turned on for a reason, I guess. On our RS drums overhead track, cleared out some ringing stuff, pulled up a little bit of the low end. Here is before, and here's after. Not a huge difference, but that's what that is. Okay, our overhead group, our spot group, our ride, and our hats are all going into a cymbal bus. And this is kind of where we do our big processing here. So all of those together. So the first thing we're going to do, SSL console emulation. We've got our harmonic distortion knob all the way up, a 3-ish dB boost around 9K. That is pretty much it. So here's before. And after. Just giving us a little bit extra on that top end. FabFilter Pro Q3, we are clearing out some ringing junk, pulling down the 6 to 8K-ish range and pulling up 1-ish K at a pretty wide Q. So that's going to give us back some of the body of our cymbals. So here's before. And here's after. Just a nice little taming action. Let's move along. Soft tube tape, which I'm slamming on the C type. I've even pulled down our headroom to make sure that it hits even harder with the saturation. So here's before. And here is after. Mainly what we're doing is taming that snare so that we can have everything come in at a consistent level before our next maneuver, which is our compressor. So if you take a look at our meter here, the cymbals meter, we've got big movement on that snare. But if we throw our tape emulation on, our snare is sitting right around our cymbals, which is going to make it much easier for our compressor, our FET compressor Mark II from Softtube, to do its job of leveling everybody out. So we're at a 12-to-1 compression. We are at a 3/4 wet to dry mix. Another extra little bit of saturation here, a slow attack and a pretty fast release. Our sidechain is set to 2K. So once again, we're only using the high stuff, making sure that we're ignoring the snare. So that's going to give us before. And after. Also just a little volume boost in general happening there. After that, the gift from God, okay. Soothe 2 from Oak Sound. This is like the best plugin that's ever existed. We have our link turned all the way down. Our selectivity is almost all the way up and our sharpness is almost all the way up as well. We're set to hard, oversampling with a high resolution. Set to really focus on the 8 to 16K realm, cleaning up some of the ringy ickiness. So before. And then after. And this all comes together to give us this nice saturated tape, I feel like, overhead picture. Cool. Everything put together, we have this. So let's throw some room mics in the mix. We have a ton of different room mic things happening here. For the most part, this is our room mic close, including the far room mics from RS drums. I happen to know that the room fars in that drum room are not particularly far, so I put them together with the close mics from the rest. Like here's our ambient close mic from the GGD. And then here's our ambient far mic from RS drums. As opposed to the close mic from RS drums. Just much, much closer than the GGD and especially the Superior Drummer. So let's do a little bit of processing. Our ambient far from the RS drums, clearing out a lot of that high stuff and chilling on some ring business, and that is it. So before, and then after. That 8K-ish range is just really harsh on the RS drums stuff. Probably same deal with the RS drums close room mics, cleaning out like a big ring basically. So before, and then after. So those two together. Our GGD close mics we're not doing anything to yet. Superior, clearing out just a little bit of the honky ring business. So before and after. Just a little bit of junk. So here's our whole close room bus before processing. So now let's do room processing. Oh my goodness, whoopsie daisy. That should not have been like that. Whoops. All right, first thing we're gonna do, big harmonic distortion on the SSL channel. You guessed it, we're gonna do that on every freaking track because that's how we roll. Pulling a little bit of, it looks like 6.5K out. That's pretty much all we're doing with this SSL channel. Howdy friends, it's Editing Drewsif here. I completely missed the low pass and high pass. So as you can see pretty clearly, we are high passing to about 120 hertz and low passing to roughly 5K. The big thing about these SSL channel emulations is the actual SSL boards vary pretty wildly on their high and low passes. And also decibels per octave on the passes are really, really light and gentle. So 5K could be more like 12K, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of room there. So before. And after. FabFilter Pro Q3, cleaning up a ton of cymbal ring stuff, clearing out our high end even more, getting rid of some of the hum, and then giving our snare a little bit more body. So before. And after. Moving along. Fat compressor, you know what time it is, baby. Pretty fast attack, somewhat slow release. We're on all buttons mode, or British mode, apparently. Our drive is hitting pretty hard. Our mix is at 75, so once again, we get just a little bit of that original transient. Our side chain is at 120. I think I normally do this if I have a kick drum in our room mics, which you may notice that we just don't. It's tech death. We don't need kick drum mics in the room. There is one section where we end up using kick drum room mics, just straight up used a Slate trigger sample to add those back in. Otherwise, it's crazy triggered, angry, digga. Back to our compressor. So before. And after. And actually, yeah, here's some toms before. And here's some toms after. I like to slam my room mics pretty freaking hard. Our next move, we are side chaining a gate from the snare microphone. So when the snare hits, what we're going to be doing is boosting our room mic by 9 dB with a 10 millisecond attack. So it gives it a little bit of time for the actual snare transient to hit and do its thing. And then it chills around for about 250 milliseconds with a nice easy knee. So before. And then with our snare triggering the gate. which sounds a little goofy on its own, but once you throw it into the mix, you still get the nice body on your cymbals from the room mics, but then you also get that extra little bloom on the snare when it hits. In the mix before the gate, and then in the mix after the gate. Just kind of cleans you up a little bit. It's nice. Let's keep it moving, friends. This is a track I have called Idiot Snare. This is just an unbelievably gigantic snare room sample. I love this sample so much. I've used this sample on like most of my tracks for the last like 6 or more years. Like it's been quite a while. So here is our little fella. We're tuned up just a little bit to match the other snares. Just a gigantic bam of a snare, and we're gonna take it even further. We're gonna boost our thud range a little bit. We're gonna get rid of our honk, pull up the slap range, and then clear out that 8K sizzle junk. Also just straight up low pass, the whole thing right around 9K. So before and after. I'm actually hearing, I kind of wish that I did like a... Can't win them all. All right, from there, FET Compressor Mark II, very fast attack, a pretty slow release, insane drive, and the all buttons mode turned on. This is fully wet, and we're just slamming the ever-loving crap out of this snare. So before... and after. Huge, gigantic. Basically, we're using this room mic / sample to create a reverb. We've got Saturn II, and it looks like I've just very, very, very barely pulled back the dynamics knob. Chill the sustain just a little bit. Doesn't look like it made that big of a difference, but there you go. So that is our Idiot Snare track, and without it, and with. It's really for sections like that that really make the big difference there. Another important note, I have this trigger instance set up to only trigger on the harder hits. So when we're doing stuff like blast beats, it just doesn't cut in at all. So it's just the bigger hits. And even stuff like that, the little ghost note roll kind of business. It's only doing the harder hits. So it's hardest possible and then just below that. All right, we're getting close, y'all. Let's do our ambient far bus. What's going on here is our Invasion Tom track, our P4 snare room track, and then we have our Superior snare room track. The way I like to do drums a lot of the time is to run the far room mic tracks as just snare, or at least separate them out to their own tracks, because then you can process the heck out of them and once again kind of make your own reverb. So here's our mics with nothing going on. Clean out a bunch of icky ringing stuff, get rid of the super low stuff, and then drop our highs and clean up some of the sizzle junk. So here's before. And here's after. Next, compress the crap out of it. All buttons in, quick attack, pretty quick release, dual mono. Sidechain turned up just a little bit so that the lowest part of the toms are not affecting our compressor. Drive turned up like crazy. We're probably going to be doing something like 10 dB of gain reduction, I'm betting. So here's before. And then here's after. Going ham sandwich. All right, doing the gate trick. So we have the snare mic coming into this track and boosting up the snare. I'm not really sure why I did this, given that it's literally only toms and snare, and I have the tom track turned way down, but we're doing it anyway. Interesting decision. So there you go. Here's without our great big snare room track. And then with. Throw our idiot snare back in there. An important note with our ambient room track. Ambient room? What the hell am I saying? With our snare far track, similar to the idiot snare track, on stuff like blasts, we're going to just be automating that track way down. So that's kind of your standard hit volume. And then once we start blasting, we're dropping down by like 6-7 dB. I'm not sure why that's there. That's probably a whoopsie on my part. We've got just a little bit left to cover here. Let's talk about our drum bus. On everything, we are pulling down just a little bit of the 4K range and the 8K range yet again. Here is before. And after. I'm betting that was to make room for our vocals or something along those lines. After that, this absolutely lovely distressor type plugin from Softtube. This is like my secret weapon on drums. I absolutely love this thing. So we have an 8-to-1 ratio. We have an 8 millisecond attack. I believe that's 100 milliseconds release. I'm not quite sure on that one. The whole point of this is just mega parallel compression. Our mix is like super down. So if it were all the way up, we'd be getting this absolute insanity. But when we pull it back down, off, on, just gives you a little bit of extra movement. I think I actually had it higher than that. I think I had it around here. Just a little bit of extra stuff going on there. And then over here, we have our emphasis set to high frequency emphasis 2, which is basically just saying kind of ignore the kick. After that, we're doing the same thing again with an SSL bus style compressor, a similarly fast attack, but a pretty slow release. So yeah, basically the same thing. Our ratio is 4-to-1. Drive right at the middle, so it might be doing just the littlest bit of soft clipping. Sidechain is set to 150, so again, we are ignoring the kick drum, and our dry wet is at 25, so this really is not in there. But if we had it all the way up, we'd get this. We drop them down 25. Just once again, just a little bit of extra business going on there. Top it all off. Tape emulation from Softtube. We are not quite hitting very hard, so this is just going to give us another top end boost and maybe the very littlest, softest bit of clipping here. So let's see. Take a look at our meter before and after. and after. It glues us up just a real little bit. So there is one last thing here, and this is goofy dodgeball snare, which we add in for super duper heavy segments. Using trigger 2 to trigger the Chris Adler snare from GGD Invasion. Sounds like this with no processing. It's also tuned up so that it fits with our snare. So the first thing we're going to do, clear out some of that ringing stuff just a little bit, and then pull out a lot of that sizzled junk at the top. So here's before. Also adding 11 dB of gain on here. Big slam. Next thing we're going to do, FET compressor Mark II, drive almost all the way up. Attack immediate. Our release is pretty quick. All buttons in mode with our input slammed. So this is just going to absolutely destroy this signal. So here's before, and here's after. Just crazy. Here, it looks like we're doing a little bit of gate work to control that sort of hissing that was happening at the end there. Yep. So we're just getting the big hit and a little bit of ring afterward. So before, after. After that, we're jumping in with gain reduction 2, going absolutely ham sandwich, pulling up the clarity, which just kind of cleans up the high end stuff. We have our warmth almost all the way up, which is essentially just the saturation knob. We've turned our body down just a little bit. So here's before, and here's after. So there's that. Here, we're going to clear out this one ring area a little bit and then clear the low end. So here's before, and here's after. So it really just is that high-end junk. From there, FabFilter Pro R reverb, which is set to clear out some of these rings just a little bit and then give us that nice low-end business. This is basically bringing back the sustain that we got rid of with the gate. So before and after. That great big anvil kind of business. So before. And then after with our crazy anvil. So good. And that is our drums. Ta-da! Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please consider hitting the like button. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned, because we're going to be doing the guitar and bass and vocals and synth and the whole rest of the song, probably in 2 more parts, which will be coming very soon. Thank you. Have a good one. If you're digging Greylotus, please consider going and hitting like and subscribe on Greylotus too. But yeah, thank you.